What's up, everybody? In this video, I'm going to show you how to read and deserialize from a JSON file using .NET Core. Okay, so where I want to start out here is there's a website called generatedata.com, and this is where you can go and just generate test data. We're going to keep it very simple here, generate some contact data. So I'm going to select name, phone, and email and JSON format and click generate. And it's going to generate some objects for us here. One thing you can do up in here is change the property names if you'd like. So I'm going to just make mine all start with an uppercase. So name, phone, and email, and that will update it down here. And then you can just do Control A, select all, Control C, and that will give us our JSON data that we're going to need for this project. So next, we're going to go into Visual Studio 2022. Select New Project, ASP.NET Core Web API. Click Next and give it a meaningful name if you like, and create, and we'll let that spin up. And we've got our Web API here. So the first thing I want to do is add that JSON, create a JSON file and add that to our project. So I'm going to right click our project and go to Add New Folder. Name it JSON or JSON, however you like to pronounce it. And I'm going to right click that folder and click Add New Item. In the search, you can type in JSON file. And I'm just going to call this contacts.json. So that will create our file here. Just do a Control A to select all and replace that with what we just copied from generate data. And there's our JSON file. So the next thing we need to do is create a model. So we're going to create a contact model. For that, let's right click on our project again, go to Add New Folder, and create a Models folder. Right click on the Models folder, Add. Go to Add Class this time, and I'm going to call it Contact. And for this, I'm going to add a contact ID as well. So prop and shortcut would be you can type the word prop and then hit tab twice. And that's just a shortcut. I'm going to keep integer for my contact ID. I'm just going to replace that with contact ID. Now, the next three are all going to be strings. So prop, change this to string, and the first one is name. And now you can copy that and then just change the names, so phone and email. So that's going to be our object. I'm going to create the contact ID because if you insert these into a database, you're probably going to have an ID column, so actually, let me rephrase that. When you have these in a database and you're using this as your model, you're going to be pulling back an ID column. So for this, our JSON file doesn't have any IDs. So if you have a contact table in your database that's auto-generated, the ID is auto-generated, we're not going to use that. So anyway, let's just move on. The next thing we need to do is create a controller. So I'm going to go to controllers, right click and click add and select controller. Go to API and select API controller empty. And I'm going to call this my contacts controller. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need a couple of fields. We're going to need one for, to be able to read our JSON file. So I'm going to say private read only, and I web host environment. So this is going to be type web host environment, and we can just call that, you could call it host, or you can just call it web host environment. For fields, I typically like to start with an underscore. And then we need to inject this. And if you want to work with a connection string, I'm just going to add another field. Like if you're going to insert these into a SQL Server database, then you would use an iConfiguration object, and we can just call that configuration. And now, if we go back to just click on our contacts controller and hit Control Dot and select Generate Constructor, it gives you the options if we want to use these as if we want to set up some parameters and set these fields. So essentially setting up our dependency injection here. So I'll just click OK. And now when this controller is created, we're going to have our web host and configuration available to us. So the next thing I need is I need an API method, so I'm going to add an HTTP GET accessor here, or not delete, HTTP GET. Okay, so, and I'm just going to add an method that returns an IEnumerable of contact control dot to bring in our models namespace. Call it get contacts. And now the object here is we're going to read into our JSON file and deserialize this to a list of contact. So let's see how we can go about doing that. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is create a list of contacts. So list contacts. Okay, and now to use that, I'm going to use StreamReader and my web host environment. So using StreamReader, reader equals new StreamReader, and now I'm using string interpolation here. I'm going to call web host environment and content root path, and that just gives us the path up to but not including where our file is located. So what I do need to do is add / JSON, the folder, and the file name. So that's going to read our contacts.json file. And now I can just set our contacts equal to, I'm going to call JSON convert, and for this, control dot, and all the way down at the bottom here, install package newtonsoft.json, select find and install the latest version, and it's going to go ahead and install the namespace for us, or add the using at the top, and then we call deserialize object, left angle bracket, to a list of contact, and then we just want to say reader.read to end. Okay, so I think we can just ignore this warning here. I'm going to configure severity and just turn it off. We have a list of contacts. I'm creating a new list. Sometimes .NET Core says, hey, this might be null. I don't see how it could be null if it's, we've created a new list. So anyway, and then we just simply need to return our contacts. And once again, if you want to null coalesce that, you can say, new list of contact or something like that, but there's really no reason to worry about that. So the next thing I want to do is actually set a breakpoint right here, and we're going to debug this. So I'm just going to go up to web application here, our start button, and click that, and it's going to bring up our Swagger UI page. So we're going to, hit this breakpoint, and hopefully we'll have our list of contacts. So here's our Swagger UI, and there's our controller. So try it out, execute, And let's go back and let's go see what we have. So I'm going to hover over that. We have 5 contacts. There should be all 0 contact IDs because we didn't have that in our file. This is just reading what's in our file. So it has all of our data right here. So that's pretty much all you need to do to read a JSON file and serialize it to a list of some POCO class. POCO stands for plain old CLR object, which is essentially what our model class is here. Now, if you wanted to take these contacts and insert them into a database, then we could create another method here. So I'm going to create a private void and insert contacts and pass a list of contact into it. So we're going to pass our contacts to this method. And for that, we're going to need a connection string. So, and we're also going to need to know what we're connecting to. So let's go into SQL Server. I have in my test database that I'm working with, I have a table here, a contact table, which is just waiting for us to populate it. So it has a contact ID, name, phone, and email. And in order to avoid, hard coding an insert statement, because we are going to use ADO.NET here, I've got a stored procedure that just inserts a contact. Very simple. And, I will put all of this on my GitHub and put a link to it in the description. So let's go back to Visual Studio and see how we can accomplish that. So the first thing we need is a connection string. I'm going to go to my app settings and I'm going to hit a comma here and start typing connection strings. And there you go. And we can name it test connection. Sorry. And now just give it your server, localhost, database. You could also use a database keyword there instead of initial catalog equals. Whoops. Okay, so just double checking. So it's my test is the name of my database. And integrated security equals true. That just means that we're using Windows authentication. So go ahead and save that. We can copy our test connection because we're going to use that here. Go back to my contacts controller. So now to get the connection string, I can use this configuration field up here. And I can just say something like var cs for connection string equals configuration dot get connection string and pass in our test connection that we just created. That will give us our connection string. And now I need to use SQL connection. So using SQL connection and control dot and install package system.data.sql client, find and install the latest version. So that will add our namespace up here, system.data.sql client. And I'll just call it cn equals new SQL connection. Okay, SQL connection. And I'm going to pass in my connection string. And the first thing I always want to do is make sure my connection is open. Now, we need to call our stored procedure. So if you remember, our stored procedure name is insert contacts. So I'm just going to create another variable here. I'll call it, you can say string SQL equals insert contact. And now the way we're going to do this is using SQL command. So SQL command equals new SQL command. And we just pass in our connection string and our stored procedure name and our connection. And the first thing we want to do is set the command type because we are calling a stored procedure. So SQL command type dot stored procedure. And now we need to add our parameters. So if we take a look at our stored procedure, which is right here. So these are our parameters. So we need to add these and they need to match what our parameters are in here. So @name, @phone, and @email. So we will say something like command.parameters.add with value and at name. Okay, so, and I always do this when I'm working with ADO.NET. I always start writing the SQL command statement. We're going to be doing this for each of our contacts. So let me just go ahead and do this. So for each of our contact in contacts, and then I'm just going to grab this right here. I think so. Contact name. Okay, that looks right. Okay, so and then command.parameters.add with value and phone contact.phone, and the same thing for email dot email. I'm going to do a quick build and see if I've got an extra curl. Okay, it's fine. Okay, sometimes you wind up with an extra one of these. Okay, so and then the last thing we do. So we've got all of our parameters. We have our command type, stored procedure. The last thing we need to do is call execute non-query. So just command.execute non-query. So now I'm going to put a breakpoint right here on this method, and we're going to just call this method. So insert contacts and contacts. And once again, I'm going to start debugging, which is going to bring up our Swagger UI, and we're going to just step through this method and check it with our SQL database. So let me just expand that, try it out, execute, and let's step through. So first thing I want to say, do I have my contacts? Yes, I've got my list of contacts, and all of the contact IDs are 0 because, as I said before, our JSON file doesn't contain those. And one thing I forgot to mention is that on our contact table, if you look at the design here, our primary key, our contact ID, is also an identity column, so it's going to auto-generate our IDs for us. Okay, so now let's go and make sure that we've got our connection string. That looks good. So I'd say we can probably just skip right down here. I'm going to F9 on execute non-query, and then boom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That should be it. Okay, now we should see our list of contacts here. Go into our database where before select top we had no records, and now we have our 5 contacts all listed in our table. So like I said, I will go ahead and post the stored procedure, the create table script, and all of this code on my GitHub, and I'll put a link to that in the description. Please go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time.